Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the complimentary ICMI webinar, 5 Things Contact Centers Don't Know About Customers, sponsored by InContact. I'm Erica Strother-Maroy, Community Specialist here at ICMI, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we begin, we have just a few announcements. First, you want to make sure to disable your pop-up blocker if it's currently turned on. You will notice there are several icons at the bottom of your console window, and that first one allows you to view our slides today, so please make sure that one is maximized. Next, you'll see a Q&A icon. We'll be saving some time to answer audience questions at the end of this webinar, and you can participate by submitting your question at any time during the presentation. All you have to do is type your question into that window and then click Submit. Now, if you experience any technical difficulties during the presentation, you can click the question mark icon on the console to access our event help guide. Clicking on the other icons that you see on your console will give you access to speaker bios, more information about our sponsor InContact, as well as information about upcoming ICMI events, resources, and research. And I do want to let you know that this presentation will be recorded and will be made available for on-demand viewing following our live event today. You'll receive an email within the next couple of days with instructions for viewing the recorded presentation, and you can also download a version of today's slides in PDF form. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our panel of speakers for today. Sarah McCauley is Vice President of Client Operations for KBM Group. Pete Sleece is Senior Director at the CEB, and Madeline Gingelbach is Vice President of Strategic Marketing at InContact. I'm also joined by ICMI's Community Manager, Justin Robbins. As I mentioned earlier, you can learn more about each of our speakers by clicking that speaker's bios icon in your console. And I do have one final reminder before we get going today. Please be social and share what you learned. You can actually access your Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn accounts directly to the event console, so we really encourage you to keep the conversations going and share what you learned. And with that, I'll turn it over to Justin to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Erica, and thank you everyone who joined today. I have to be honest with you up front. This is probably one of the most exciting studies and one of the most exciting webinars that I've been on in recent history. And the whole reason that is because we were able to do something really interesting, really compelling, I think, and that was ask customers just a set of questions and understand what do you expect when you interact with an organization. And then we went and took those same questions and asked organizations, what do you think customers expect out of your interactions? And the findings were so interesting. And more importantly, 5 things that really stood out through our study were these gaps where customers are thinking one thing and organizations are thinking that customers want something completely different. And so I'm excited to share some of those findings today and have our awesome panelists share some of their thoughts on what these things mean for the contact center and customer service industry. So a little bit about the 2 studies that we did is the first, InContact partnered with Harris Interactive, and they looked at over 2,000 customers, and what they wanted to know is during the busiest shopping periods of the month, which is August through January, what are some of the things that customers expect from their online and phone experiences with organizations? Then earlier this year, ICMI went out to over 500 organizations, and we asked the exact same questions that we asked those consumers. So what do you think customers are expecting from you during their interactions? And the top industries that we saw included financial services, healthcare, education, and telecom. And just to give you some idea of what type of organizations these represented, most of them were B2C. Over 70% said their primary focus was customer service, and the actual respondents were at a manager level or higher. So the way I want to present these is really 5 facts, and the way that we got to these 5 facts is I compared what did the consumers say about their experiences, and then what did contact centers say. And I looked for the biggest gaps between the 2 sets of expectations. And the very first gap brings us to fact number 1. And fact number 1, and this was the largest gap, is that 80% of customers would say that when they're interacting with the company, they feel that that company puts more effort into selling them something than they actually do providing great customer service. And so we asked contact center leaders, and only 12% felt that way. The rest of you, the rest of us, we're thinking that, no, we have customer service is our focus. Customer service is our most important metric, and the experience, that's what we're striving after. But the reality is that the customer's perception of what we're doing is something completely different. It's that we're trying to get them to spend money, trying to invest more, and that we're not focused on that experience. And so one of the things that we at ICMI would recommend is we need to take that opportunity to put ourselves in the customer's shoes and understand what the experience is like from their point of view. One of the next gaps that we found is that, believe it or not, 86% of customers said that if they had a bad customer service experience, they would be very likely to switch companies. And when we spoke to contact center leaders, only about 19% of leaders actually agreed and said, you know, we don't know that our customers would be that willing to leave. And for some of us, maybe you're thinking, well, we're the only contact center that does what we do. We're the only organization that does what we do, and so our customers don't have another choice. Or maybe for others of you, you're thinking, yeah, you know, we do have competitors, and actually we don't even track customer retention today, so we don't know who's leaving, why they're leaving, what might be causing that to happen. But I don't know about you, but for me, when I was running my contact center, somebody would have told me that most of my customers would leave if they had a bad customer experience. I would want to do everything in my power to prevent those bad customer experiences from happening. Well, also looking through these stats, and the things that really rose to the top was this idea that when we're reaching out to our customers through either follow-up or proactive communication, 86% of our customers expect that they're going to have a choice in what channel that happens in. But only about 37% of us, the contact center leaders, thinks that's the case. And this is where I start to put myself into my customer shoes, because, right, I'm sure some of you know what that's like. You lead a customer service organization. It's easy to think about experiences with that internal frame of mind, and sometimes it's hard to take a step back and be like, wait a minute. What's it like to be a customer? What are those experiences like? And for me, I think, for example, about how often I'm traveling on the road, and how my inbox, probably like many of your inboxes, can pile up with email after email after email, and that's just one account, not to mention personal and work, right? All of these places to contact me, but I, for one, only have one cell phone number. And I know that when someone texts me, it demands my attention way more than an email does. And if you were an organization that I was doing business with, there are certain things, probably important things, like maybe a service outage with one of my utilities, or that a shipment has arrived at my door, that I want to be notified, and I want my attention called to it. And so I want the ability to have that communication come to me in the channel that's going to get my attention the most. But for a majority of us today, we're not giving customers that option, and we don't think it matters to them. But in reality, it does. So this next fact I split into two parts, and I got to be honest with you, when I was looking at this research, it kind of shook me to my core, because what the research showed us was, first, is that 64%, a majority of customers, expect that the agent that they're talking to on chat, they can also talk to that person then on phone. And maybe you're thinking, okay, Justin, I can kind of see how that makes sense. If you're chatting with someone about something and it's not appropriate for chat and you need to move it to another channel, you need to hop over to phone, that makes sense. Keep it to the same agent. But really only 20% of contact centers think that matters to customers. But the next part of this fact is what was scariest to me, and that's that a majority, 67% of customers, expect that they're going to be able to talk to the same representative that they did on previous contacts. Only about 24%, a quarter of contact centers, believe that customers have that expectation. And let's start to think about the implications of this. If we were to staff our contact centers, that I could assure you, Joe, Jane customer, got to speak to Tom, got to speak to Susan every time you called in, we probably have way more agents than we need to, not even to mention the nightmares that this might come into from a staffing or a routing perspective. And so when I started thinking about this, I'm like, what do customers really want out of this? What are they really asking for when they say that they want to talk to the same representative? They're asking for convenience. They're asking for ease. More importantly, they're asking for someone who just understands them. They don't want to waste more time re-explaining themselves. They don't want to have confusion between conflicting stories. They want a cohesive, unified experience when they're interacting with an organization. And that, I believe we can get behind. That, I think, is something that we can provide. But the question really becomes, are we willing to do it? Are we able to put the work in to make those types of experiences possible? And really the last fact that I want to share before we can tap into the panel and learn more about what they think this really means for us as contact center leaders is that 69% of customers said that if there's a company with a great service reputation, they are willing to pay more for that product or service. And about a third of you, 35% of contact center leaders agreed. And the reality of this is that it's easy for another organization to duplicate your product, perhaps. And maybe they can come in at the same initial price point that you're offering. But when we focus on providing a great customer experience, assuming that product is equal, assuming that even at a starting point, price is equal, when we start providing that great customer experience, that becomes the differentiator. That becomes the thing that customers seek, because I can get this thing at any number of places, but what I really go for is that experience where I don't have to worry that company's going to understand who I am. And I can rest assured that whatever I'm going after, whether it's a product, whether it's a service, that I'm in good hands. And to me, as someone who values my time, that's something that I'm willing to invest in. And it turns out that a majority of customers are as well. And so you can dive into more of these findings. You can read about all of the different areas where customers said one thing and contact leaders said another with the brand new research report that we put out with InContact, and that's on ICMI.com. But what I'd love to do is invite our panel here to talk about just some of these findings. And I know I shared them at kind of a high level, but I'd really love to dive deeper into what each of the experts think these really mean for contact centers. And so this first question, I'm going to start with you, Pete. By looking at these two studies, we discovered that there was a clear disconnect between what customers view as in their experiences and how organizations think customers view the experience. What suggestions might you have for contact center leaders to get a better view of the customer experience?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Justin, and something that we at CEB have been looking at for years and years and years now. And the reality is asking customers what their expectations are can be a good first step. But notice it's not what I would call the solution, because what customers tell you and then what they actually do in some instances is very different. So beyond just asking customers what they want, I would identify what is it that your customers actually do. And so it's not a creepy thing like we're going to follow them home or anything like that, but rather watch their behavior through surveying or through focus groups or through sessions that you set up where you actually observe how they click through your website, what they click on first, what they click on second. Through surveying, it would be asking them questions. You know, when you first attempted to resolve this, in which channel did you go first? And if you weren't able to resolve it there, where did you go next? By combining what they expect with what they actually do, you start to get a more clear picture of what you should be providing to your customers from a customer experience standpoint.
That's great advice, Pete, and I laugh every time I hear that because it's so true, right? Our customers, they'll tell us one thing, we'll ask them, and then they go do something completely different, and we made our changes based off of what they told us, and then we're thinking, but now you're not using it that way. So that advice of looking at not just expectation, but behavior, that's great insight, Pete. Sarah, what are some of your thoughts on how a contact center can get a better view of the customer?
Well, I think in support of what Pete has said, I think the other piece that creates the disconnect is that as leaders, we sometimes have our rose-colored glasses on, if you will, that doesn't allow us to really clearly see and react to the statements and behaviors of those customers. And so the other piece that's really important in here is that as you're monitoring and as you're viewing the verbatim contacts in surveys and in actions and in focus groups, that you are really looking at these from a very objective, almost a third-party mindset, because when you're so involved in the product or service that you provide, it's sometimes very easy to color or shade the responses that customers are giving you to the answer that you want them to provide. And I think one of the hardest things we do as leaders in the call center is to review customer satisfaction surveys, to review focus groups and behavior feedback, and actually take that information verbatim and understand this is truly what the customer is saying, even if what they're saying is a little bit uncomfortable and a little different than what you expected that outcome to be.
Yeah, Sarah, that's so true. And every single person on this webinar is an expert in their business, and that can be incredibly valuable, and it can also be, a bit of our Achilles heel sometimes, because we do have that closeness and we think we know what's best. But stepping back and saying, when was the last time that we really objectively asked those questions, and we're willing to kind of have this look of what's reality for our customers today? So I love that you said that, Sarah. Madeline, any thoughts from you on getting this view of the customer experience?
Well, I think that, some of the challenges are out in the industry is sometimes this can feel really overwhelming. And I don't think that it needs to be. Things that Pete and Sarah said are absolutely true. And the other piece of it is that even if you don't have a formal measurement process today, just having a conversation with customers that you may have a relationship with, we all do when you work in a contact center. There are some customers that you talk to, and that you can call up. And so part of it is even if you don't have a formalized process, just having conversations is a part of that clue. And then the other thing that I would mention is just like when Pete was saying about what people say and what people do, is we spend a lot of time sometimes looking at what our agents are doing when they're interacting, and sometimes not thinking about the entire customer journey, meaning this piece of how are they handling in self-service, because my big passion is your IVR, if you just look on the voice channel, your IVR is your first agent. It doesn't just serve up calls to your agent. It's an agent in itself. It's the first impression. So using that as an example to say that what customers do is interact in other ways besides just with agents.
Yeah, Madeline, that's one thing that when we put the research together and we have it documented in the report, is that a lot of those interactions with the journey are happening early on, in particular with purchases, early on in that purchase cycle. And whether it's in the IVR, whether it's on the website, as organizations, we need to have that view that stems beyond just when they're talking to the agent or just when they're placing that order or whatever that is, to all of the other points before and after that led to that total experience. So I'm really glad that you said that. Madeline, this next question, I want to get your thoughts on. So if it's true, and if 86% of customers would switch companies because of a bad customer experience, I mean, that's scary. So what do you think organizations can do to uncover what's causing those bad experiences, and how can they prevent them from happening in the future?
Well, Justin, I think that first of all, the answer kind of like what Pete says, what they say they're doing and what they're doing is different, and those numbers are very different between contact center managers and the customers themselves. And I think that those numbers are that the answer is probably somewhere not on either one of those numbers. Am I making sense? I don't know if that many would abandon. But I think the spirit of this answer is that there are consequences to bad service experiences. We all know that intuitively because we've seen it happen. And I think what can they do to uncover those bad experiences? Number one, I think that a lot of times we know what they are. This idea of preventing them in the future, my suggestion is that typically bad service experiences are caused by a combination of, or sometimes it's single-threaded. It's the people interaction itself, and then there's an issue of process and technology. And solving process and technology is the hardest part to do, but it can also be the highest leverage. And so my suggestion would be go with what you know, because you probably know some of them already, and tackle them in process and technology, and see what pieces are people versus process and technology.
Excellent point. Thank you, Madeline. Pete, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the key here is to learn from your customers, and I use that word very deliberately. We are in the business of delivering outstanding customer experience and surveying our customers, but I think if we reposition that surveying our customers to learning from them and using that language when we reach out to them in any capacity to say we'd like to learn more about your interaction so that we can make improvements for the future. We position ourselves as being open to learning instead of just gathering data that may never be used. And I think you can take that same position when you identify who it is that you're reaching out to. So we often think about recovery of clients or customers, but at CEB we've learned that some organizations have successfully achieved recovery by making that a secondary opportunity or the secondary goal. And the primary goal is learning from your experience so that we can make improvements. And simply by doing that, we open up the door for recovery.
You know, I love how you just even mentioned just the change in language and how sometimes it's those simple words that we use that can help get more involvement and get that participation. So really great advice, Pete. And Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Well, sort of as a wrap-up to that question, I think the other piece is that absolutely it should be a learning experience. And if you have the approach that says, I'm going to learn from this, then your final step is change and action. So when you have learned what the source is that's creating the bad or inconvenient experience that's creating angst among your customers, learning that and then taking action to change it or to modify your approach or even to acknowledge that that is something that you won't change. It probably is a rare circumstance, but consciously making the decision once you've learned what's creating the issue to make a change or to adapt your processes so that it doesn't happen going forward is key. Because once you've learned of that experience, once you've been made aware, if you take no action and you make no change, then that leaky bucket is going to continue to leak because you never did fix the problem.
So if I can kind of sum this up, I think what we're really saying is, I mean, if we want it to change, we just have to make it a priority. The contact center is already a busy environment. We've got a lot of things coming at us, and if it's just a mandate that comes down from someone saying, hey, we've had a lot of bad customer experiences, we need to do something about that, maybe we'll do the research, maybe we won't, maybe we'll do something about it, maybe we won't. But when we recognize and all buy in that this matters, this is a priority, this is something we want to do, then that's, as Madeline said, we understand that it's going to be kind of a multi-pronged approach and it's going to affect a couple different things. As Pete said, we have to, make it language that's approachable, that people want to get involved. And then once we've gained that insight and we kind of have that expectation up front, Sarah, great point. We've got to get to work, right? We've got to put things into action and drive some change out of this. So love that. Next question I have, and Sarah, I'll start with you. So talking about the customer preference and follow-up or proactive communication options, why do you think customers expect that choice, and what can organizations do to identify and implement the channels that are right in their contact center?
Well, as we all know, and we even opened up this this webinar by asking people to be social, right? We've got our hashtag and we've got our Twitter accounts, and in today's day, the use of the social media, whether it's through Facebook or Yelp or Twitter, any of those are so prevalent that customers really expect a response. They don't think of those queries or those issues or questions to be going out in the ether, if you will. They are really looking for companies to be engaged, to monitor, to be responding in a real-time environment. And so as you, as an organization, are seeing customers engage with you, particularly when you start to see the volume of mobile communications, etc., it really helps you to identify what are the advantages and what are the tools that I need within my call center to support my team. How is my call volume being driven? Am I getting calls via cell? Am I getting requests for chat? Am I getting consumers that are looking for proactive notification? And have they asked me to text them? Have they asked me to email them? And based on that customer request, it really drives the channel tools and means for you to communicate to those customers and give them that follow-up information.
Yeah, Sarah, it's one of the things we hear, Sarah, is contact centers often say that we're not serving these channels today. How do we know if our customers are trying to contact us? How do we know that they want to use these channels? And you provided some really great examples of how we can do that and where they're already telling us today. It's just a matter of listening and paying attention to when they do. Madeline, any thoughts here on how we can best identify and implement some of these channels?
Well, as far as identifying and implementing, first of all, I think the first question for an organization that wants to switch directions, and what I mean by that is if you're primarily inbound, trying a little outbound on proactive side, or starting to collect preferences on follow-up and stuff like that for various channels. The first thing is we're big advocates of testing, and I'm really passionate about that, experimentation. And so the first thing might be, first of all, is what can you do today? Is there another channel in your contact center that you could experiment with? And then test small and see what happens. The other piece of it is, as far as identifying channels and this idea of expectation of follow-up or proactive, people in general are interacting more. Just people, us. I mean, how many times have you been in the grocery store and you have texted your spouse or sweetheart and said, is there anything you need from the grocery store? Well, that's proactive. Not waiting until you get home. You forgot the half and half. So I guess what I'm saying is that part of it is that we're all beginning to interact more often and in different ways in other channels because of the ultimate multi-channel device in our pockets and purses. And just being pragmatic, experimenting with another channel that you can actually do today can help embolden you to do more in the contact center, just being very pragmatic about it.
I love that you said experiment, because I think we as leaders sometimes forget that we have the ability to do that, and we have the ability to test and see what's possible and ask those what ifs. So great advice, Madeline. Thank you. Pete, any thoughts from you here?
Sure. So what this screams to me is control. As a customer, I want control, and of course that's what we want as control. But the reality is, as soon as we reach out to customer service in any capacity, even if it's self-service on the web, we're relinquishing some of that control. We don't have an answer that we want to have. We don't have a solution that we're looking for. We're striving for an outcome, but we need some help. And so that help is really where we can step back in. And as service leaders, what we've identified is that it's a lot less about providing more and more, because while that might feel right to a customer, the reality is what they're looking for is that outcome. And so the way to achieve that is through better guidance once they get into a channel and we can identify what it is that they're trying to resolve. Once we identify that, customers are more than willing to be guided to the right channel, even if it's not one of the ones that they would have originally chosen, if what they ultimately get out of it is an outcome. And to your earlier point, Justin, about cleaning out the inbox, I've got an email account where the only thing I get, I think, is spam. And once in a blue moon, it comes through as something that I actually want to pay attention to. When it comes to proactive outreach and things like that, I may select that I want it, but the reality is I only want it when I need it. And oftentimes, I don't need what you're sending me, so I hit delete. But when I do need you, I really need you, and I need you to guide me through the experience to achieve that outcome that I'm looking for.
Yeah, Pete, I think that's easy for us to lose sight of sometimes, right? We hear all of the buzz around needing to be, providing this omni-channel experience and that the connected consumer and how they're changing our world, and we sometimes forget that at the end of the day, they're a person who comes to us because they have a need, and we have the ability to fulfill that need, and they just want it done the easiest way. They don't want to have to fight to make this happen. And what this really comes down to, like you said, is us understanding what that is for the customer. And for some of it's a little scary to know that they're in control in a lot of ways. But when we align our resources, our people, processes, technology, like Madeline mentioned earlier, when we align that to provide those great experiences, it's a win-win for us. It's a win-win for the customer. So talking more about the customer experience, going back to that stat about talking to the same rep, I think we'd all agree that allowing customers to always talk to the same rep is practically impossible. So Pete, starting with you, what do you think that customers really want when they're saying that they want this, and are there any times when it makes sense for them to continue talking to the same representative?
Yeah, sure. So what do they really want? They want you to know the story that they've already unveiled to the first person they spoke with. They want you to know that about the hurdles that they've leaped over, about the about the challenges that they've already had, and they just want you to fix the problem. So that's what it is that they want. It's something that we've uncovered through our quantitative research that we call customer baggage. And for those of you in the airline industry, we're not talking about the bags on the conveyor belt, but rather those things that customers bring into nearly every single service interaction that may not have anything to do with the interaction that they're having right now, but that will absolutely have a huge impact on how they evaluate this interaction. And if we as service professionals don't handle that baggage, address, acknowledge, own that baggage, then we're likely not going to provide as positive an outcome as we otherwise would have. Now, to the follow-up question of does it make sense to speak with the same person, I think absolutely it does. And when we, respond to a customer, I'm sorry, I work in a massive contact center and it's not possible to get back to me, that's a company problem that we then put on the customer. And so shame on us if we don't have a way to get back to that same person. Now, certainly if we're organized in teams and I can say, well, I know Justin started that with you, but I've got all the notes from that interaction and I'm happy to pick up from here, that can work just as effectively or at least close to. But I think we've unwittingly created these problems for customers that felt like good reasons at one point, but ultimately is not a very good rationale.
Yeah, so two things I love about that. One, I think if we're all being honest with us as customers, we all got a bit of baggage. So I think we can definitely understand how our customers would approach interactions with those same kind of, tainted experiences and maybe heightened expectations as well. But then the second piece there is, Pete, I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said that, we've really overcomplicated things for ourselves. We've taken something, serving a customer. Serving a customer, it's something that's been around for a really long time. And, through whether just, bad processes, old policies, disconnected technologies, we've kind of buried that beneath all of this other stuff. And I think if we can find ways to get back to the root of that and get back to serving that customer and providing those great experiences, then we will see a lot of wins here. Sarah, what are your some thoughts on speaking to the same representative?
Well, I think that what we've sometimes lost sight of is that when the customer calls with an opportunity or a service opportunity where they need help and support and they've provided us the history, Pete is exactly right. What they want you to do is make sure I don't have to go through this story again. But remember, when we say the follow-up, in theory, if I'm truly being proactive in my support of the customer shouldn't have to call back and request the same rep or have that expectation. Instead, my organization should be set up in a way that you call me and I get that information and I have your history and I document it so that if anybody else sees it, they know, they are aware. But also, can I, as the original rep, take that problem to resolution, which means that I then get the answers, do the follow-up, and I'm making those outbound calls to customers, and I have the story, and I am the same rep. And so that is where, as an organization, you start to rethink problem solving, because when the customer calls, you either resolve it, hopefully that famous one-call resolution, but if you don't, what can you do within your organization to allow the resolution of that issue to be consistent with the same representative so that that representative has the contact with the customer and the customer believes that that Sarah or Madeline or whoever they reached out to truly was the one that resolved the issue. It doesn't mean I have to fix all the problems. I may have to manage some stuff internally to make, changes or adjustments or credits or, whatever that problem solve is. But if I can own the call back to present the final resolution to the customer, for the customer that feels like the same person took care of me end to end.
Yeah, that's a really kind of different approach that I think a lot of us maybe haven't considered. Is sometimes how can we put the ball in our court to again, if we can provide the resolution, if we can direct that customer to the right outcome. Maybe they did, maybe they don't remember. Hopefully they don't have voice recognition, and they're like, hang on a second, you were like just a half pitch higher than the Sarah I remember talking to. But you're right. When we be the expert, when we can put it in our court and provide that great experience, that's really what the customer wants, and that's what our job is at the end of the day. Madeline, any thoughts from you on this idea of speaking with the same rep?
Well, I would just say that it's the classic answer. It depends. It also depends on what business you're in. If you are doing really high value, long sales cycle or longer sales cycle that's less brief transactional stuff, having them talk to the same rep, A, may be possible, and B, may be optimal. So I think that's kind of a classic it depends. But then the other piece I want to say is that, Pete said something really important, this idea of outcomes. And the reason they want to talk to that rep, I agree with Pete and Sarah, is that they want the outcome, which is something getting resolved. And one of the I recently heard Chip Bell speak, and he had a great compact definition of effortless service. And he said, protect customers from effort and worry. And I think that the reason that people say they want to contact the same rep is because they want to reduce the effort, as Pete and Sarah said, telling the story over and over again, and then the worry that what will happen if they have to keep telling it over and over again, that it will take longer and it won't get resolved. So the other piece of it would be is it could be from not necessarily a service recovery, but on a goodwill standpoint is, are there times that you want to experiment with having the same person call back when it makes sense for your business, and experiment with that to see what happens? Because in the end, the other thing that reps can do, even in large contact centers, it's happened to me as a customer, is people setting expectations and saying, I'm not going to be calling you back about this, Madeline, but another one of my colleagues will, and I promise you, they're going to know your situation and they'll be able to take care of this. Or Justin will probably be the one that calls you back tomorrow, or whatever. Again, it depends on the size of the purchase or the value of the customer, but those are just some thoughts from my standpoint.
Madeline, I'm making a list of your E-words, and I'm going to turn it into a motivational poster because I love the idea of experimenting, but that second piece about just setting expectations. Yes, 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 right? Really, that's also the other piece of this. I don't like that uncertainty, and so if we're just transparent about this is what's going to happen, this is what you can expect from here, we're not going to have those things on the back of it. We're like, wait a minute, why are you contacting me? What do you know? Why are you qualified to do this? Setting that expectation up front is definitely great advice, so thank you for that. So one of the stats that I didn't share, but something that we found when we were doing this research was actually around the channels that customers would prefer to use when contacting a company. And something that may surprise some people on this webinar is that customers actually said their preferred channel of choice when contacting a company is actually through chat, even more so than inbound phone. Despite that, a majority of organizations aren't supporting chat today. 90+% are supporting inbound phone. So why do you think that many organizations are still slow to adopt chat into their contact center? And maybe what advice could each of you provide on making the business case for adding chat as a new channel? Madeline, I want to start with you.
Well, so first of all, as far as the preference for using chat, recently at our user conference, that topic came up, and I heard some really great feedback from some customers. So I'll distill it down to say that the slowness to adopt chat, I think one of the big things is that the skill set for people handling chat can be radically different from a person who's a ninja on the phone. Like your ninja voice agent may not have the best written skills. And to get productive in chat, you eventually have to handle different concurrent chat sessions. And so some of it is a hiring and a skill issue. And the second thing that I would say is the preference for it for customers is that it is a relatively, I'm getting all nerdy, but it's a relatively synchronous, asynchronous communication. Meaning I'm almost talking in real time, but when I'm waiting for an answer, I might be checking my email. I might be doing X. I might be doing Y, and I can multitask. I think that that's why it's becoming more of a channel of choice. And then the final thing is, you know me, experiment. So building the business case to me would be is you experiment with the channel.
Great. Nope, love that advice. Sarah, what are some of your thoughts here?
Well, I think sometimes folks have avoided the chat piece because they perceived it to be a difficult solution to integrate within their call center tools. And I think Madeline's point is well made that, you know, it's not that hard. And so you need to reach out there and figure out what the solution is that works with your environment and gets you set up, but that you really need to, you know, sort of get your head around it. The other piece that I think scares off call center folks is that chat is expected, just like the chat on your phone, right? Just like the text messaging on your phone. Chat is expected to be almost a real-time, immediate sort of support. And if, in fact, you don't have the team able to support that or to provide that sort of timely response, people fear the negative that comes when consumers get a message that says there's no agent currently available, or there's, you know, we're not open for chat right now, use another means. And so I think people just sort of hesitate to get into it because they're afraid, hey, I'm just going to make it worse because I'm not going to be able to manage it appropriately. Chat can be very effective from a production perspective. And again, you know, supporting Madeline's point, I think you just sometimes need to just jump in the water and start swimming.
Yeah, no, it's again, really, really, really great advice. Pete, add into this. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, so why are folks reticent to add it? Well, you know, let's improve the IVR with speech recognition. That'll help deflect some calls. Oh, that didn't deflect calls. All right, well, let's add email. That'll deflect some calls. Oh, that didn't deflect calls either. Well, what about web self-service? That'll deflect some calls. Well, that didn't do it either. Shame on me for believing that it would over and over, right? So why would I add another channel just to increase volume and add to the complexity of my business when we're expected to create incredibly excellent customer service, effortless service, while reducing cost? Well, I think I answered the question a few different ways. The reality, though, is that chat can be a very good channel, but you have to be very thoughtful in how you deploy it. The wrong way to deploy it is come one, come all. And just open the doors and let folks roll in. We know that customers that have had that kind of experience have a very low confidence level in being able to resolve their issue in chat, and it can be quite expensive. So in terms of guidance around entering the world of web chat, I would say start slowly and identify those issues which can be fully resolved in chat, and maybe even begin with just proactive chat. So identifying triggers that indicate that a customer is struggling and maybe getting ready to pick up the phone and call, like they click on the Contact Us link or something like that, and then prompt a chat to them to see if you can resolve the issue by keeping them in what is perceived to be the same channel. That's how I would start. Apply the KISS principle and start small.
Great. Thank you for that, Pete. One thing that I'll kind of add on here is, chat, I think we're going to continue to have more conversation as an industry around chat as more and more contact centers look to ask the questions of, is it right for us? Do we take the step and start offering this channel? And one thing I'll mention is that all next month on ICMI.com, chat is a primary focus for us. So maybe if this starts you thinking and you're like, oh, maybe chat, I need to learn more about that. Definitely stay tuned. We're going to be talking a lot more about chat in the kind of months to come. So I want to ask one more question of the panel, and then we're going to share a bit more from Madeline, and then also open it up for any questions from the audience. But the last question that I would like to ask of the panel is that going through some of these stats, and for people who kind of dig deeper into this research, they might see that some of these stats are hard for them to believe. What advice or maybe kind of closing bits of wisdom do you have for anybody who might be sitting on this webinar and be thinking, I'm a bit skeptical. I don't know that my customers fall into this bucket. What might you say to them? Sarah, I'll start with you.
I would say that, again, take those blinders off. Try to take some of the emotion out of your approach to your contact center in belief of, that they're the best and they're the brightest and that your customers are all happy, happy, happy. And instead what I would do is really take the opportunity to really look at the feedback you're getting, the surveys you're getting, the social media, what they're saying about your organization, and look at it very objectively and realistically to see how, in fact, your organization lines up.
Great. Thank you. Madeline.
Well, I think that we didn't talk about it here in this comparison question, but this kind of skepticism. Well, first of all, healthy skepticism is helpful. But the other thing I want to mention is reframing all of it. We can always improve. And the other piece of it is that overwhelmingly the research showed that consumers are actually largely having positive experiences. It's just that the negative experiences have a lot of consequences. And it was, 84% had positive experiences? So that's what the research showed. So the answer is it's not all bad news. But the point is that there's consequences to when things don't work. And I think that if we take that as a largely positive message, I think it can be more energizing around addressing some of the other issues that aren't working so well. That's my thought.
Yeah, great point, Madeline. That really is true. By and large, organizations are doing so many things right, and these are the opportunities for us to kind of continue to tune the dials, refine things a bit more, and continue to provide great customer experiences. So, Pete, for you for kind of some closing thoughts.
Yeah, so let's enjoy the successes, but focus on the failures. And we focus on the failures by identifying where effort exists for our customers, and working to reduce or even eliminate that effort so that we can truly create the effortless experience. And the best way to do that is by identifying where the effort exists throughout the customer journey. We have to realize that many customers, if not most, are interacting in multiple channels before they finally achieve resolution. And so what does that journey look like as they begin on the web and move to chat and then to phone and finally an email? And where do the pain points exist along that entire way? And then our focus, again, should be on reducing or even eliminating that customer effort.
Great. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Sarah and Madeline. What I'd love to do is before we open up the panel for questions and questions from all of you is, as I mentioned, InContact did partner with ICMI to underwrite this research. So, Madeline, I'd love for you to just share a bit more about InContact and the work you're doing there.
Yeah, I'll do it super quick and just kind of keep moving through those slides since you're driving the car there, Justin. We're excited to help sponsor this research, and part of that is because we know at InContact that all contact centers have goals, and our passion is to help you reach them. So when you think about why you might choose InContact or consider us, from our standpoint, is we're the global leader in cloud contact center solutions, and we want to handle all of your customer interactions. And there's some reasons why we've become the leader. First of all, we know that people, when you make the choice to go to cloud, you're using Pete's words, surrendering some control. And you need to have superior reliability and security, and that's a part of it. So we have guaranteed uptime 99.99%, and we also have an active-active system architecture to make sure that it's working well. The other thing we realize is that when you need a solution, as we talked about today, there's a lot of different channels and demands from customers, everything in one solution, and you can have all of these different channels in one solution and have your WFO all integrated together in one solution with InContact. And it needs to be easy to implement, customize, and manage. That's important, and we want to make it for more business users to be able to handle easy changes on the system and give you customizable ways to achieve your KPIs. And the next piece of it is to be able, of course, to support agents anywhere, to have the flexibility to have agents at home, have agents at multiple locations, scale up, scale down. That's always important. So you can expand your workforce to different locations quickly. And finally, what you also need is a company that's committed to your success, that has experts in contact center, experts in technology, so that you get expert-based customer support to help you accomplish those goals. So we're excited to have been a part and help sponsor this, and you can visit our website at InContact.com. But let's get to these questions. I think that's what everybody wants more than anything.
Awesome. Thank you, Madeline, and thank you, Sarah and Pete. I know that I certainly have learned a lot today, so really interesting stuff. Okay, so we want to definitely get to your questions. If for some reason we don't get a chance to answer your question live today, we'll be sure to follow up and answer all questions left in the queue offline. So we'll go ahead and dive right in. So great question just came in. Justin, I'm going to pose this one to you and put you in the hot seat. So in this era of increasing regulation of unsolicited e-communications, what best practices exist to provide customers with that proactive communication that they really want but may not be willing to sign up for?
Yeah, great question. I mean, really this comes down to the battle between marketing and the contact center, right? I mean, if we're being honest, I love my marketers out there, but typically it's not the contact center who's just saying we just want to contact people for multiple reasons. It's most often marketing. So really one of the important pieces to look at here is, first off, what synergy can you build with that team, with the marketing team, to make sure that as they're kind of programming their messaging, that it's not distracting from, it's not pulling away from the really important communications that might need to come out from a corporate standpoint. Perhaps say it's to announce that outage, or it's to reach a customer about a problem with their order, or whatever it would be. Some of the best ways that I've seen organizations do this is to really differentiate and have that specific list for those kind of important, critical communications. And then you can get those customers to say, okay, that's okay. Email me with your offers. Email me with your other stuff. And email me when you've got important things to talk about, or just only email me when you have those important things to talk about. And then that way, I as a consumer know I have that choice. And so when you're contacting me, it's not getting buried beneath all of these other communications that, by and large, we know that they're marketing or they're kind of sales solicitations, and so we don't want to be bothered by them. So that's one of the best practices, to look at breaking out the list in such a way. Another possible option here is, if you know that primarily, again, trying to differentiate between these unsolicited types of contacts that we might be getting through email, is perhaps looking at a different channel for some of these communications. And I mentioned text messaging being one of them. Text messaging, again, you have to have that opportunity to opt in, and it can really stand out. I know that unless I've already opted in to somebody to send me coupons or promotion, that if you're texting me, it's going to be important. So sometimes it's looking at using a channel or a platform that is different from how you typically communicate, so that your voice in that particular instance stands out above your voice maybe during any other time. I'm not sure if anybody else on the panel might have some thoughts there as well.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that, Justin, is just being very clear with your customer that your outreach is going to be service-related specifically. So when we reach out to you, it will strictly be about service. And that, of course, relies on you being able to get that separation of church and state that you talked about between service and marketing. But if you're very clear with your customer and mentioning that, the only time we'll reach out to you is for a service-related issue, customers are much more willing to participate and allow you to provide that kind of outreach.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both.
And actually, this, Madeline, one thing I did want to add is I think agree in both. And the one thing I want to add on is that part of this is education, because this permission that Pete's talking about and this separation between marketing and service, some of that can actually happen if you're willing to invest in, and you have the ability in your system, but to have an agent say, for service only, like Pete is saying, we'd love to be able to send you a text, because I do think text is a great channel for that. And having your agents through the voice channel talk to them about it and educate them about what that looks like to secure those permissions. If we educate and it's not just another email that we might hit delete, I think that we can build that. And of course, test, start small. You can test that and see what happens. So,
absolutely. Thanks for chiming in there, Madeline. Well, our hour is drawing to a close, unfortunately. So a few quick announcements before the top of the hour. First of all, again, if you guys think of other questions, feel free to send those through. You can reach us via social, #ICMI webinar, and we'll be happy to answer any remaining questions offline. Really quickly, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to fill out the survey that we've just pushed out to you. We want to know how we did today and how we can improve for future webinars. And then one other announcement. Justin mentioned earlier that we've got this new full research report out. It's up on our website. Actually just pushed out a link that will take you guys directly to that landing page. So if you're interested in learning more about what we talked about today, definitely encourage you to check out that report. All that being said, really want to thank you guys all for attending today. Thank you to all of our panelists, Pete, Sarah, Madeline, Justin. Great stuff today. Don't forget that you can download a PDF version of the slides directly through this console shortly after we end. And do keep an eye out in your inbox for instructions for viewing the recorded presentation within the next couple of days. Before we go, I do need to mention that this presentation is copyright 2015 by ICMI. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by ICMI, which is solely responsible for its content. And our sponsor InContact is responsible for their content. So on behalf of ICMI, our speakers, and our sponsor InContact, we thank you for attending today and hope you have a great day.